So that's one extremely important nuance, I think. Eliminating the totalitarian regime is never a solution to for a problem of a totalitarian state. The only thing that works is that, or if an external enemy destroys the system, that's possible for an external enemy, but from within, it's never possible to destabilize the system through the use of violence. So non-violent resistance is always the most efficient way to fight a totalitarian state. And in particular, people have to continue to speak out. They have to continue to speak out, because if the dissonant voices stop to speak out, then the totalitarian state starts to become extremely cruel and aggressive without limit. That was typically what happened in 1930 in the Soviet Union. Then opposition and the dissonant voices started to go underground. They stopped to speak out in public space. And exactly at that moment, Stalin started his large-scale purifications, which claimed tens of millions of victims in a few years. And exactly the same happened in Nazi Germany in 1935. Also there, the resistance went underground because it seemed that it became too dangerous. And then the system started to become extremely aggressive and absurdly cruel as well in Nazi Germany. And that also shows the radical difference with a classical dictatorship. If in a classical dictatorship, the dictator succeeds in silencing the opposition, he usually will mitigate his aggression. He will become more mild. He will become less aggressive, because at that moment, the dictatorship has enough common sense. He's not under hypnosis or something. And he has enough common sense to realize that he has to show to the population that he will be a good leader, that he will be good to them. Once he is in power, he realizes that if he doesn't want to exhaust himself and his regime, he has to become more friendly. And exactly the opposite happens in a totalitarian state. Once the totalitarian state silenced all dissonant voices, first then it starts to unleash its aggressive potentials. And that's because at that moment, the hypnosis becomes complete. At that moment, the level of hypnosis goes deeper and deeper, and it reaches this point where a certain part of the population, again, usually about 30%, starts to satisfy all its aggressive and frustrated impulses by directing them at the part of the population that they consider to be their enemy, namely the people who are not into the process of mass formation or who go against it. And they typically do so as if it is an ethical duty to do so. So the masses typically commit cruelties as if it is an ethical duty, simply because in their mind, everybody who goes against the mass lacks solidarity, lacks citizenship, prefers his own individual importances before the collective, the well-being of the collective, and should be destroyed. So, and this shows us actually, once we understand that if we want that the hypnosis, the mass hypnosis, should be disturbed constantly, that people who do not buy into the narrative should speak out, no matter where, on television, on the radio, but also in the kitchen and in the shops and on the street. They should continue to speak out, because that's the only way to disturb the process of hypnosis. And even Gustave Le Bon said already in the 19th century that it's almost impossible to wake up the masses, but that if people continue to speak out in a quiet way, in a sincere way, the mass hypnosis usually won't reach this point where they start to commit cruelties as if it is an ethical duty. So to continue to speak out is of utmost importance, and we have to do it in a very specific way. When speaking out, it doesn't make sense to try to convince the masses or people through rational argumentation. We have to speak out as rationally as possible, and the rational arguments should be as sound and as pure as possible, but we should never expect that people will up or that we'll be able to force people, to convince people to stop believing in the narrative just because of the reasons I just mentioned. Because unconsciously, people do not buy into the narrative because it's right or correct or accurate. They buy into the narrative because it leads to the new social bond. Just like football supporters in a stadium do not sing a song because they like this, they think the song is right, or because it's a very beautiful song. They sing it because it connects them to the other people, to the group, to the collective. Because of this, it creates this resonating, vibrant feeling of being all together. So rational argumentation, for several reasons explained in my book, won't work. And still, you have to continue to speak out as rationally as possible, but always knowing that what will have an effect on the masses will not be the rational arguments. It will be the resonance of our voice. So what we should do is we listen to everybody as careful as possible, as polite as possible, as respectful as possible. And then you just say something like, well, okay, I look differently at this. I have a different opinion, and I will just tell you what my opinion is. You say it and you leave it like that. And the resonance of the voice will have an effect. It will not change things immediately, but it will make the hypnosis less deep. So that's a general rule. Of course, this general rule always has to be adapted to every specific person. It is like Sigmund Freud said, we have to reinvent the theory for every specific patient. So that also holds here. But in general, that's what the first and most important advice is, that continue to speak out. No matter how dangerous it becomes, or no matter how difficult it becomes, continue to speak out, because one thing is for sure. If the dissonant voice stops to speak out, then the destruction will start. And it will not only be destruction for the people who do not go along with the narrative, the masses also destroy themselves as well. The monster, totalitarianism, always becomes a monster that devours its own children. That's what Hannah Arendt said. So we have to continue to speak out for ourselves and for the others as well.